costs 30 cents. Everything you know about business is wrong. That's the title of a new book by Alistair Dryburgh. He says everybody has read the same books, understands the same systems, and knows how to perfectly calculate their advantage in the business world, yet the same few people always come out on top. What gives them the edge? Here in studio to talk us through Dryburgh's thesis is Alan Jordan of Bookbuzz. Alan, welcome to the program.
Morning, John.
This book sounds remarkably familiar. Is it really telling us anything new?
No, that's the difficulty. It's probably not. He's been a little bit cheeky with his title. I think what he's really saying is, he's saying, look, you've got to just look at some things differently, and the difference that gives people the competitive edge is what's actually inside them. So maybe we'll go through some of the examples that he's given from big business of the mistakes that they've made, and maybe how we can learn from them.
Okay, well, I know he mentions something about Dell making a lot of mistakes in customer service and eventually learning something about that.
Yeah, the big thing about Dell was that they went mad on efficiency measures, and really the efficiency measures began to destroy their efficiency. So back in about June 2005, a prominent journalist was blogging that Dell lies, Dell sucks, because what happened was he was getting onto the customer service department, he was getting absolutely nowhere. So it snowballed into a saga, a kind of a weblog mini-series, and while this kind of silicon opera was going on, their market share began to shrink, their share price began to shrink, and their customer satisfaction ratings went off the charts, as in downwards. So they had a huge issue, and of course the difficulty was Dell was using a measure that a lot of companies did at the time. I think a lot have changed it now, is that the handle time per call. So when you rang in, people were measured on how long you take to handle the call. So what were the people doing? Well, if I was going to handling the call and I was going over time, I would just transfer it. So on average, customers were ringing into Dell and they're being transferred 7 different times to 7 different operators. So you can imagine the level of frustration. Now, if you take that type of measurement, the example he said, you take that type of measurement for Dell, what happened to Dell, the customer service went ballistic, they had to go change all of that, and actually they brought in a new measure whereby it was problem resolution. But look at what happens to organizations that we see now and health service. Like, for example, hospitals. So hospitals set a target that nobody has to wait longer than X weeks for treatment. So they start prioritizing less urgent cases who are close to time rather than most urgent cases who join the waiting list later. So you can see the issue that you have if you get the measurement wrong. So the same thing, say, for example, sales set targets for revenue. So, for example, sales guys then go start buying the business just to meet the target. Or if we ever get a teacher assessment program here in Ireland, if they're strictly assessed on exam results, they'll concentrate on teaching to the test. So that results in kind of boring lessons, turning pupils away from following the subject to a higher level. In fact, maybe that's some of the issues we have around maths and science now.
Right. Well, it sounds like you're talking about perverse incentives. I mean, we've seen that in the financial markets and, leading up to the crisis, the banks especially, mortgage lending, the incentives were to just get the product out the door, regardless of credit quality and so forth. What does Dryburgh say about incentives in the economy?
Yeah, it's a very interesting piece. The problem with incentives is, first of all, they're all singular. They're all directed as you and me as individuals. There's no team incentives. But you know the thing about it, John, is that research gone back over this last 10 to 15 years, but no one is listening. So, for example, 2 researchers in Israel did a study on a kindergarten. It closed at 4 p.m. So, for example, if the kids arrived late, the problem was you were kind of inconveniencing the person who was in the kindergarten. So what they did was they monitored that for 4 weeks. Then they put in a fine system. So put in a fine of $3. So what will happen? That'll obviously improve. People won't be less late. No. The exact opposite happened. So people actually, it doubled.
Right, I can pay for being late now.
Absolutely. So that was it. It was kind of removed the guilt. So, for example, so it took away the motivator of me worrying about you as an individual, and it started prioritizing other elements. I can justify this. So what he's really showed is that incentives don't work. And he does a whole piece on it, which is really quite interesting. And a lot of the research by psychologists are showing that really you've got it wrong, because what it does is it removes the other motivators, like helping a person, trying to work in a team, doing the right things, analyzing risk. So, yeah, very, very, very interesting piece.
Okay, and he also talks about what separates top companies in the same sector. There's an example, I think, of Procter & Gamble. In 2009, went down in terms of revenue by 18%, but its competitor Reckitt Benckiser went in the exact opposite direction in the same economic conditions. What was going on there? 2
different challenges. The difference was accounted for the first two, Unilever, Procter & Gamble. They succumbed to a kind of reflex action, while Reckitt Benckiser went through a thought process. Unilever and P&G thought, tough times ahead, consumers want to spend less, so they introduced value versions of their products. Reckitt Beneker went the other way and said, tough times ahead, consumers will be more conscious of value. So either they'll want to spend less or we need to work harder to persuade them that it's worth spending more. So it chose the latter and produced substantially superior versions of its products, in some case costing twice as much as the budget version, and then their sales went up. So their sales and profits went up by 15%. Procter & Gamble and Unilever went down by 16%. So the wrong approach.
It sounds like the lesson there was to maybe trust your customer a little bit more, or trust your product a little bit more. Does Dryburgh have anything to say about that, or is he only talking about the people and what business people can do within their businesses, not about product?
Well, yeah, he doesn't go too much into the marketing and the strategy side. I suppose he is giving you he's showing the examples where companies have got it wrong, and they've got it wrong by maybe not thinking enough about it, or by looking at different options. And he says that personally comes back to the integrity of the company and the individuals within it. So he doesn't kind of make broad, sweeping statements. So in fact, the title of the book is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. He's really shown there's lots of things in there you read and say, actually, well, that makes perfect sense. Just some people have got it wrong.
So in a way, instead of everything you know about business is wrong, it's sort of like you already know everything about business. You're just looking at it the wrong way.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it, actually. We might just send that into him and he might put that on the next version of the book.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for that, Alan. That was Alan Jordan of BookBuzz, and BookBuzz joins us every Thursday. Now it's time to move